Hi Libra, welcome to your April 2019 Astro Update. It's Raina here, and you're the sign where there's a lot of energy in the house that you rule. So you ruled the 7th house in astrology of committed partnership, and in your particular chart, the 7th house is Aries. Now, of course, I'm talking about the universal chart and not your own personal placements, because they can very easily differ from that. And so I'm keeping this general. But the 7th house is Aries, and the sun is in this house from the beginning of the month. And on the 5th, we have a new moon in this 7th house. Now, maybe you're celebrating the fact that Uranus has left the 7th, and that may have created a whole bunch of upheaval in your relationship. And I don't know how this would have manifested for you. It might have been different for all of you. For some people, it could have been that you had a partner who wanted that freedom, who wanted to kind of open up the relationship, so to speak, because Uranus is also about being, I was going to say being kinky, but being unconventional, nonconformist. So when we're looking at the 7th house and we look at it from the aspect of marriage, I mean, what is more traditional than marriage? It doesn't have to just be limited to marriage when we're talking about these kinds of relationships. We're talking about committed relationships. But commitment means commitment. And, if you have an open marriage, you're kind of bending that term. And there are ethics in open marriages. It's not like the people set the rules, but it's different from sneaking behind somebody's back. Let's put it that way. And I do think that, personally speaking, I may not want that type of relationship, but I don't have any real thoughts on other people because I know that we're all different. But you may have had that come up for you. You may have had something where perhaps, there was just some issue of maybe your partner, if not you, wanting freedom in that relationship. And now Uranus is gone from that house. And just and also just things happening kind of like suddenly that affected your marriage. It could have been other things. But now Uranus has left that house. And now it's in the 8th house. We won't get into that because that could be kind of kinky too, even more so because the 8th house is the house of sex, among other things. But I'm being a little silly here. I'm not going to talk about the 8th house right now. So the new moon is in the 7th house, so there could be a new day in your relationship, even if it had been struggling in the past. You may have come to some kind of agreement, understanding with one another. This could also be good for having clients and maybe new clients, attracting new clients to you. Some kind of lawsuit could be, turning a corner, or it's going your way. Or, I don't know if I'd say it's going your way, but there's new development with it. On the 10th, we have Jupiter turning retrograde in Sagittarius, and this is your 3rd house, the 3rd house of communication and writing. It could be something along the lines of, let's say you have a YouTube channel, which this is kind of a little bit confusing because the 11th house, when I first was starting to learn about predictions, it was the 11th house that I always heard was connected to the internet. And lately I've been hearing the 3rd house because the 3rd house is kind of how news gets spread. The media could be the 3rd house. And, just how you communicate your ideas. Now, obviously, the internet is the way we do now. In the past, we might have written books exclusively or been a media personality exclusively in terms of the mainstream media. But now that we have the internet, that has kind of superseded everything else, and we can kind of do it for ourselves. So if you have like some kind of a YouTube channel, maybe you've had subscribers, you might notice that it went crazy. Maybe you had a viral video, and now it's kind of calming down. Jupiter retrograde isn't going to be the same as the other retrogrades, the personal planet retrogrades, but it can still manifest as a slowing down. So just keep that in mind. If there was something that seemed like it was really going crazy in a good way, and then it came to a grinding halt, I don't know if it would come to a grinding halt, but it's only temporary. It goes direct in August. But the other thing, too, about this is that you could have an opportunity come back to you that you kind of didn't take advantage of the first time around, and that could be good. On the 17th, Mercury goes into Aries, so Mercury joins the party in that 7th house. Well, there's not much of a party at that point because you only have the sun there at that point. But that's good. That's good for relationships because you're going to be talking. You're not going to be just sitting there and stewing in your own negativity. And so this is good for just really getting to know the other person deeply, or keeping those lines of communication open. Maybe before, that's what was creating the problems. And maybe you've learned that this is how you keep everything in a good place. I certainly believe that to be true. And Libra, as a sign, you may, keep your mouth shut about certain things because you don't want to make any waves. And the problem with that is that things fester and eventually they come out, and by then they can get very twisted. So it's always better to state your anger or sadness, your problems within the relationship as soon as it happens in a way that is palatable to the other person, that's respectful, but not to kind of hold on to resentments, because they don't go away just because you don't say them. And, keeping the peace at all costs can't be the goal all the time, because in relationships, there's a give and take, and if you really want to have an authentic relationship, you have to be an authentic person. And when you pretend that everything's okay when it's not, then it's kind of like false advertising, and it's really not fair to the other person because they can't read your mind. So, learning to communicate with your partner in a thorough way is a great thing. So hopefully, especially since it's in Aries, it's very direct, to the point. On the 19th, there is a full moon in your sign at 29 Libra. Of course, this is the second one that you've had in a month. The other one being at 0 degrees of Libra on the equinox of March 20th. So, coming full circle, in that first house, you're changing, Libra. You're experiencing change within yourself, and as often happens, when you change, the world around you changes. And it could be a change for the better. It doesn't have to be a change for the worse. And the other thing about this is that even if there is some kind of, I get good feelings. So I was going to say, even if a relationship ends, I think you're going to be the better for it. But I don't see this energy in April as ending a relationship. As if anything, I see it as the improvement of a long-term relationship or a committed relationship comes in April. Not that it's being threatened. But I think that you are starting to let go of certain things within yourself, and that is helping the situation. On the 20th, the next day, we have the sun going into Taurus, which is very nice. And because this is a sign that is also ruled by Venus, just like your sign, and there's kind of like a very mellow, down-to-earth quality with Taurus. This affects your 8th house, and so you have the sun joining Uranus in that 8th house, and that makes you much more inclined to be studying metaphysics. You might be, I think there's something there, Libra, because you've had back-to-back full moons in your own sign, so you may be learning about yourself and letting go of any parts of yourself that are still frivolous and not thinking in that sense. Or, and I don't even want to just talk about being frivolous, but all the air signs can have the tendency to over intellectualize things and not understand the connection between their consciousness and the creator and creation. In other words, looking at, using the mind, but in a less powerful way that is just dealing with mundane kinds of information and mundane types of activities. Whereas the 8th house is the house of metaphysics. Uranus is a planet that can be quite intuitive, and so you may be like drawn to study those books that deal with the mysteries of life. So on the same day, your ruler Venus goes into, wait for it, that 7th house of committed partnership. This is another reason why I say that I think this is a great month for people who are in committed relationships. You have a lot of good energy here. And Venus can smooth things out. Venus can bring the romance back to a relationship, or maybe you're planning a wedding. Maybe all of this is you planning a wedding, even with the new moon there, the sun there at the beginning of the month. Maybe there's something that you've been trying to plan for maybe the summer or, the June to August period. Who knows? And then at the end of the month, we have 2 retrogrades that are happening in outer planets. So it's not necessarily going to affect you personally, but it could impact you based on the houses that they're in. And these are both going to be in the 4th house of home and family. Pluto goes retrograde in Capricorn on the 24th and Saturn on the 29th. And so just the fact that you have Pluto and Pluto and Saturn in that 4th house of home and family, whoa. And again, maybe because of this pressure bearing down on you when it comes to your childhood, for instance, Libra, you're seeking kind of books and just a way of life that can kind of transcend those influences. Maybe that's what the 8th house is going to represent for you when Uranus is there, is getting in touch with that because, and you could have like even unexpected psychic confirmations of, abilities with Uranus in that house. To me, Uranus is like the Kundalini, and I don't think I made that up. I don't know if I came up with it on my own and then I read a book about it, but these spontaneous psychic hits, if you will, I don't know how else to put it, may be actually connected to a spiritual awakening. And because the 8th house is a water house in the sign of Scorpio, it is going to connect to issues related to spiritual matters, okay? And in the 8th house, because the 8th house is also the house of the dead, this could be something connected to, maybe starting to channel or something like that. Actually, one thing I want to say about the Sun and Uranus being in that 8th house, there could be like some kind of unexpected inheritance that comes from the father or the father's side of the family. So just to remind, let you know about that. And here we have with the 4th house, we have all of this kind of, challenging stuff happening, both of these planets retrograding. Now, with Saturn in the 4th house, this could simply be that you have to maybe you were doing some kind of work on your house and you have to go over something, or the carpenter, the construction worker has to do something over again. With Pluto, it's more of the psyche, and that could be with Pluto retrograde, where it uncovers something within you that you haven't really dealt with, that connects with your mother or with your family of origin, your childhood, and maybe having something to do with also thinking about your father. For instance, in the 8th house, it could be dealing with that side of the family's money. And then you see how your mother reacts. And if they're not estranged or they're not together, it doesn't really matter. But you could say for the first time, wow, now I see why things were the way they were. And that opens up a whole new can of worms. I think with Pluto retrograde in the 4th house, a lot of cans of worms are going to be slithering around. And I'm saying that kind of lightheartedly because really, this is a general forecast, so it's hard to know exactly who this is affecting. Pluto is retrograding, I think, at around 23 degrees of Capricorn. So, depending on what your chart looks like, it may be a different scenario. And some people have very small houses. Like their 4th house may be very small, only 15 or 20 degrees, with the system that I use, the unequal house system, which virtually everyone I've seen uses that system. And so they're not all 30 degrees usually. And that can mean that that Pluto is in a different house than what I'm telling you it is. So in any case, look out for that. The best way to handle things, again, is to be aware and don't over-intellectualize things. When emotions come up, if there are strong emotions that are generated from whoever, whenever, wherever, just witness them. And, don't try to shove them under the rug and distract yourself. Really sit with it and go, okay, this is what is happening, and see how it makes you feel. And kind of that's what processing it means to me, so that it doesn't go undercover, it doesn't create more repression, and you can free yourself. Really, in a sense, you could call Pluto a liberation agent, because it is a healing planet, and it is a planet that is about purging. And think about that. If you've ever puked your guts out, you tend to feel really good afterwards. Whatever the reason, it doesn't have to be just when you've been drunk. I mean, actually, when you've been drunk, that's a different story, because then you might be dizzy and the room is still spinning. But when you've just puked for, just had an upset stomach normally, you tend to feel better because you have purged. You've gotten rid of that toxic garbage inside of you. And so, in any case, this is what I have for you, Libra. I hope that you got something from this. If you'd like a personalized reading, natal chart reading, love reading, what have you, please check me out. I'm at ReinaMoonAstrology.com, and the link is below. Take care. Bye.